I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Nitish Mittal is a partner in the technology practice leading the firm's coverage of digital transformation and IT services in Europe, the United Kingdom, and Ireland. Based out of the London office, he covers technology areas across artificial intelligence, automation, cloud, interactive services, and the Internet of Things. Anushka Sharma is a senior analyst with the Cloud and Infrastructure Services team at Everest Group. She helps enterprises, providers, and investors with engagements around cloud, data center, and networks research and advisory. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Nitish.
Thank you. First of all, welcome to everyone joining in. I see we have a diverse and a global audience today. So thanks for making the time. And today we'll talk about sovereignty and sustainability, which we believe are two critical themes in the European enterprise agenda right now as we think about cloud transformation. So join Anushka and I for the next hour where we talk about this, but we also address some of your questions through this. So let's start. So, a lot of you might be wondering why we are talking about these two topics today. So we thought we'll get a sense of the room and take a quick poll to understand how you're thinking about your own investments in these two topics. So sovereignty looks at everything we're doing in, federated data infrastructures, data privacy and security, and sustainability is obviously everything to do with ESG and a lot more. So how do you expect your organization's investments in these initiatives to change over the next 12, 18 months? I know we're living in very volatile times, and it'll be interesting to see how the responses rank up. I think the poll will be open for another 30 seconds. And I see we've got a bunch of, nearly half of the people have responded already. So Anushka, while we wait, what do you think? Where do you think people are mostly likely to land up?
I think considering that these initiatives are seeing an uptake, especially in the Europe and UK and I market, I see it, most of the enterprises are the folks in this call right now taking up either the first option or the second one. That would be my call.
Yeah, but Anushka, I don't know if you can read minds, but you're exactly right. So, 52% of everyone attending today voted for a more significant increase, which is more than 10% in their investments in these areas. While 42% voted for a nominal increase, which is still a healthy 1 to 10%, and only 6% said that this will largely remain flat. And this is even more interesting and surprising, but also validation of this market, given that we are entering such volatile times from an economic perspective, where you have the Great Recession on the one hand, you still have hyperinflation, and then you still have a very, very hot talent market. So this is a lot of vindication for the topics we're going to talk about today. As we move on. So great to know the kind of enthusiasm we have as a group for this. So we'll talk about three things today. We'll first talk about the whole twist that Europe has right now, and I should say Europe and UKI with these concepts and in their cloud journeys, and why does it really matter, and what are the key attributes, key characteristics, and the contributing factors to success. We'll then focus on how enterprises are adopting this. So, what are the challenges that they face, what characteristics exhibit themselves, as well as what kind of provider ecosystem investments are happening through this landscape. And then we'll focus on, our crystal ball, as I'd like to call it, looking at the future, what's going to happen as we think about this landscape, and what are some of the implications for our enterprise customers and people on the call. So as we move on, we'll first start with some of the basics around, as I said, why does this really matter and why are we talking about this? And this might be familiar to a lot of you on the call since you're interested in this topic, but it's good to be on the same page. So the first reason is, just the massive adoption of cloud that we see in the enterprise. You see 3 points listed on the left. None of these will be a surprise. The first one continues to be the fact that cloud is an increasingly almost default mode of consumption for services and software for large enterprises, and will continue to be that way. We believe about a third of all business workloads are on the cloud. Many of them are on SaaS, but we also have infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. And if you really think about the runway for this market, it's pretty significant, because 2/3 of all those workloads are yet to go to the cloud. And that's a long tail of spend. And then we believe increasingly cloud's becoming a CFO and in some cases a board level agenda, given how significant it is as a line item for most large organizations across their stack. So we believe, all of these three reasons tell you why cloud adoption is going to grow, but also why and how critical it is to the modern enterprise agenda from a digital transformation perspective. At the same time, we're seeing these two massive tailwinds around sovereignty and sustainability, specifically in Europe and UKI. Sovereignty, as we've spoken about, is the need for Europe to have its own European cloud with either, North America headquartered hyperscalers, but also its own set of guardrails on top of the technology stack. And sustainability is something that Europe's spearheading right now, given the social nature of business and regulations around it. So we believe these two topics will continue to dominate the headlines. And because cloud is such a critical component of this journey, sustainability and sovereignty are becoming important decision-making criteria within this. At the same time, this is not happening in isolation. There is also a lot of regulatory push around this. So, if you think of GDPR and now what's happening with DPA and also the Digital Markets Act, that's creating a sense of, how Europe thinks about its cloud and technology assets, which in turn is influencing how enterprises think about it. So it's a mix of both push and pull factors, which is leading to the prominence of these two attributes in decision making today. If we move on, what we talk about is just how big the cloud market is, right? We keep talking about how big it is, but it's helpful to put some numbers. So Anushka, we've been tracking this market for a while and we've seen a lot of that growth, but how does that overall growth look like from a cloud services perspective? And where is Europe in the scheme of things?
Right. Thanks for setting up the context for the webinar, first of all, Nitish. Now that we take a look at the cloud services market, we see that it has been growing significantly over the past few years, and we do anticipate it continuing its trajectory, right? Now, as we look at the graph on the left, we see that Europe and UKI region specifically has contributed significantly, right? 34% is the amount of contribution that it has made. And when we look at Europe as a whole, we see UK and I contributing the major amount of revenue. Now, the reason for the same could very easily be attributed to the fact that this geography as a whole was slow in adopting cloud, right? One of the main reasons for this would be the fact that there was a lack of openness and trust. They were concerned about what their data would be doing on cloud, who will be accessing it, and how. As we move on, we see that this concern has led to the generation of cloud sovereignty as a major demand theme across geographies, right? And as we move on, we'll be able to see that some of the major driving factors that have led to the increased evolution of cloud sovereignty across geographies include the fact that enterprises are a bit wary of their documents, their data traveling across geographies. They are afraid of the fact that they might lose their control once they cross borders. Another factor which contributes to this conversation taking place in the market is the fact that European cloud has not been able to get the desired amount of recognition owing to the dominance being created by the US hyperscalers. We also see enterprises being a little wary of who will be answerable to them in case scrutiny or reliability issues come into the picture, right? And then again, of course, data has always been the topmost priority for all enterprises, especially in the Europe and UK and I market. And we see data visibility and their being a little bit wary of the fact that different laws in different countries can affect data residency. As we move on, we'll also see that when we talk about sovereignty, right, now that we've covered some of the driving factors, we also want to talk about what exactly we mean when we say sovereignty from a cloud perspective. Some of the building blocks which curate what a true theoretical sovereign cloud should look like include data residency and storage, cloud data center ownership, data processing and data handling and accessibility. And holistically, what each of these talk about is the fact that whatever data is being put on a cloud in a particular region or a geography should not be allowed to move out of that. Even the residents of that particular geography or country should be going through an appropriate security clearance to have access to that particular data. However, we also see some of the other variations of sovereign cloud coming up in the market, and you see those being marked in red, right? These don't essentially contribute to the curation of a sovereign cloud, But they do come into the fact that some of the ecosystem partners are using these variations to build their own version of what a sovereign cloud would look like practically. As we move on, we see that now that we've covered the true sovereign cloud, we also look at which one of the building blocks truly covers what a practical sovereign cloud should look like. And out of these four, data residency and storage is one that comes out to be the most essential one. Apart from the fact that enterprises are extremely concerned about data residency laws, there are some other key features that they're looking for when they look for a practical sovereign cloud. One of them includes the fact that they would prefer their sovereign cloud to be able to communicate and integrate with government community clouds. They would prefer an innovative marketplace wherein they have the option to utilize services and products on top of what a sovereign cloud provider is offering. This would help them avoid the restrictive nature of a general sovereign cloud. And of course, then we come back to the fact that security, privacy, all of these are topmost priorities when you talk about sovereign cloud, which brings us to the last point, which is having a set of well-defined frameworks across infrastructure, software, and networks, with cybersecurity frameworks establishing the principles of state sovereignty to cyberspace. All right, Nitish, now that we've looked at sovereignty in detail, could you tell us some of the major providers that we have playing in the cloud services market in Europe?
Absolutely. And Anushka, that's a good segue into how we've been thinking about the supply side of the ecosystem. So, for those of you who are familiar with Everest Group, we do something called the Peak Matrix, which is a very well-known research output, which acts as an informed sourcing decision tool for enterprise customers. And it's also a benchmarking tool and a competitive positioning tool for a lot of the providers. And we did an interesting series of these assessments early on this year, which focuses on the cloud services market, both in North America and Europe. So what you see right now is the assessment for Europe. And when we spoke to a lot of enterprise customers, buyers of these technologies and how they rated these providers, a few interesting things came up. One, I think the nature of provider landscapes and their investments on sovereignty in the region are very different from North America. So it's just not about having global supplier and provider relationships, but truly testing their sovereign credentials as you think about the region. And the second thing that really emerged is there's still a lot of governance that sovereignty needs. We've been hearing a lot of this hype around, sovereign cloud investments by hyperscalers as well as niche cloud providers in the region. Enterprises still are very risk averse and want a system integrator or a provider to come in and help govern that relationship, make sure that they get those assurances and they're able to manage these programs. So we believe the market is emerging, but there's also a lot of market education that clients need as they become more comfortable with this. Now, we've talked about sovereignty, and as we started, we said we'll reflect on both aspects of the equation, sovereignty as well as sustainability. I could even throw in a third S and we could make it security, but in our opinion, that's embedded within sovereignty. Now, if we flip the coin and just talk about sustainability for a moment, at Everest Group, we've been covering sustainability for a few years now, especially given the kind of questions we're getting from the market. And this is our purpose framework, which really talks about what people might know as the triple bottom line, which is to think about people, planet, and profits. By profits, we mean the business case of sustainability. In our mind, what's differentiating sustainability right now from maybe what was philanthropy earlier or CSR before that is really the fact that sustainability has its own business case at the moment. It's not just about paying lip service, but it's about truly advancing the cause of being a purpose-led organization. And at the same time, there is increasing focus on both the climate aspect of things, which is crucially important given where we live and how the world's evolving, but also the people aspect of sustainability, the social impact aspect of sustainability. So we're going to reflect on both. Now, if we move on, we'll talk a little bit about the intersection of how sustainability plays in to the technology landscape. Because, often when I'm talking to clients, a lot of their focus on sustainability tends to be around advisory or consulting services. We believe that's just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. We truly believe that the scope of services and the nature of sustainability has to span the technology and data estates that an enterprise sits on. So right from consulting, where you understand what the business case, the blueprint, the roadmap looks like, moving on to applications and data, which is really where some of the starting points exist as you think about reporting of these outcomes and your sustainability footprint, to cloud and infrastructure, which given the movement to cloud we discussed earlier, is becoming crucial and a determinant of your sustainability journey. Then moving on to governance, which is how do you not just report, but assure, and how do you manage all these concerns around greenwashing that exist right now, to the last aspect of communication, which is how do you not just communicate to the markets externally through impact reports, through everything you do in annual reporting, but also internally, because sustainability is becoming an important aspect of attracting the right talent as we think of younger people coming into the workforce. We believe at the center of all of this is cloud and infrastructure, just given the nature of spend and the direct implication from a real estate, utility, energy perspective. But there's also skills component of this, which is how do we make sure people are trained on the right skills, which increase their employment opportunities as more cloud and infrastructure jobs come into the market. As we move on, what we will see is are some of the more specific building blocks of sustainability from a cloud perspective, because that's really the topic we're coming in to discuss today. And we believe there are three specific aspects or starting points for this. One is how do you think about cloud through data centers, which is really the real estate, the facilities around all of the data centers that you have, whether on your own as an enterprise or through a provider like an Amazon Web Services, a Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud. How do you make sure those are green? How do you make sure they're more efficient? And how do you ensure utilization is also monitored? The second aspect of cloud and how it impacts sustainability is around dematerialization, which is how do you think about cloud replacing certain high carbon physical products with their virtual equivalents, and essentially reducing your reliance on hardware and physical machines, because it changes the way you procure, it changes the way you replace, and it impacts a lot of your supply chains. And then the last aspect is around utilization and performance. So how do you ensure that idle time and energy usage can be minimized? We have started to see clients using the flexibility that cloud and SaaS infrastructure provides to eliminate or reduce idle time. So for instance, can you think about movement of certain basic software, which is commonplace in the modern enterprise now, email or CRM, to save a lot of energy compared to previous ways. We've started seeing how people are now being more judicious about video-based calls and video-based collaboration, because using video versus an audio call increases your carbon footprint by a significant amount. So how do you do that and also give people some of the time back, make it easier to work and collaborate in a remote work environment? So this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch, but the point really is that as you start thinking about how your cloud journey can help you on this on this transformation, there are three specific ways you can start, and then you scale from there as you monitor. Anushka, I wonder, we've spoken about both of these aspects now. As we think about, how important they are, but why do they really matter? Do you think are there a few reasons why they are more specifically important in Europe, and which is also reflected in our work?
Absolutely. So we've been throwing across these fancy words called sovereignty and sustainability. It's high time we tell them why we're talking about that, right? So there are three key factors which are driving these conversations in the cloud services market. We'll begin with the regulatory push, which I'm sure everybody in this webinar is aware of, right? We do have these regulatory compliances such as GDPR that are coming into place to ensure that the personal data of citizens of a particular geography or location is safe, and it's not moving beyond the borders and is not reaching into the hands of foreign governments, right? We also see countries such as UK, France, and Germany driving this demand with projects such as GAIA-X coming into the picture. Now, when we move on to the second factor, we see that although businesses are independent entities, no business can truly function without there being some sense of collaboration. And when there's collaboration, there is bound to be some sharing of data in some sense. So having a cloud sovereignty concept into picture helps businesses experience an increased data accessibility and consistency, an enhanced sense of scalability and data backup, and they're also able to address their cost efficiency and budget flexibility through this concept. We also see geopolitical contributors playing a major role in driving sovereign cloud conversations. The very recent one is the unfortunate Russian invasion of Ukraine, which had put a lot of pressure on cloud providers to sort of enhance their cyber defenses to ensure that the data residing in the Ukraine regions, or in fact, the businesses that are participating from the Ukraine geography, those remain consistent and they are not being attacked by the Russian forces. So these are the three key factors which are currently driving the conversation of sovereignty and cloud sustainability in the market. As we move on, Now that we've covered in detail what we mean by cloud sovereignty, sustainability, why are we talking about that? We let you in on some of the investments that are being made by enterprises and some of the key adoption trends. We'll also be covering the landscape of enterprise adoption along with some of the strategies which are being adopted by the supply side ecosystem. As we move on, Nitish, the question for you. Now that we know that all of this is happening, what are some of the particular verticals do you think are having more traction towards these concepts?
Yeah, that's a great point, Anushka. And just to add to what you ended with, I think in terms of a recent topical push, the unfortunate events in Ukraine have actually increased the attention to sovereignty, because what's happened after the war, unfortunately, is obviously there's a lot of humanitarian loss on the ground, and it continues to be something that the region's very concerned about. But then it has also followed up with an energy crisis. It has also followed up with increasing fears of cyber warfare and cyber attacks, as just goes beyond the physical dimension. So a lot of this federated infrastructure, the ability to put in guardrails around this so that it doesn't shut down critical national infrastructure, has unfortunately in some ways been accelerated by the war in Ukraine. But if you really think about sustainability for a moment, if you look at the data point on your left, this is really how, when we studied about 3,000 odd client engagements on sustainability, where was that spread by industry or vertical? And you'll see two patterns here. One, some of the easy to understand industries are leading contributors, right? Manufacturing, energy and utilities, BFSI, right? Because manufacturing and energy and utilities have a lot of big physical footprint, and they can think about both upstream as well as downstream manufacturing or supply chain to optimize what they're trying to do from a carbon perspective. BFSI is also an easy one or a leading adopter because there is an incentive in terms of products, ESG bonds, ESG indices, green investing, which they are trying to focus on. At the same time, what's very interesting is you have a second category of not so obvious players in the public sector, in retail. In fact, the sixth one here, which is not on the slide, includes what we are seeing in healthcare and life sciences and BFS. So what we are seeing there is, in some ways, people are now thinking about how we can do this from a people perspective as we think about talent, as we think about medicine access and equity. So there is a physical aspect of what people are trying to do in terms of climate, but then there is also the aspect of some of these sectors which are more impacted by people and what they're trying to do on the people aspect of the equation and not just planet. So if we move on, we'll kind of build on what we are seeing here. And one of the things, Anushka, I've been wondering is, there are a lot of these questions that clients ask us when they start to think about starting with sovereignty, because it is an overwhelming task. Are there a few specific things we recommend, and how do we recommend that they go about this?
Absolutely. Before we go into the recommendation, Nitish, now that you've talked about certain verticals putting across a higher level of traction compared to others, although we do see the intent being there, we also need to recognize the fact that even the enterprises are not very sure on how to address those demands and how to get there, right? So we do see them trying to build across their regulatory compliance issues, and we do see them trying to gain control over their data as to who processes it, who governs it, how is somebody able to share it. All of those things are being addressed, but yet there seems to be some incoherence in terms of what the enterprises are also looking for. We see enterprises approaching this particular market from a data residency lens. We also see them dealing with this purely from a data security perspective, where they are taking a multi-cloud approach and putting their sensitive data in a regional cloud, in a regional private cloud, while the rest of it resides in a public cloud. We also see some of them taking up open source architecture to ensure their workload sovereignty so that they can avoid vendor lock-in with their cloud providers. So all in all, the net message would be that enterprises also need to kind of build a framework to come across what their demands are and how they need to be addressed, so that accordingly the ecosystem partners can go about addressing that. As we move on, we see that, just like I said, right, there seems to be some incoherence, and currently even enterprises continue to be focused on data residency and security aspects. Examples of these would be, one of the major challenges with Azure Sovereign Cloud continues to be the fact that it devoids enterprises of enjoying the true public cloud benefits. They need to be logged into a German cloud active directory. And when they're traveling to certain geographies, that is just not possible. So that is a restrictive feature of a sovereign cloud. Similarly, we see enterprises taking up to AWS more and more because it's providing them a 3-in-1 package of data residency, agility, and scalability, right? As we move forward, we would also come across the fact that ecosystem providers are trying to address these demands in their own ways. There is some sense of collaboration, but individually as well, we see all four of them, hyperscaler service providers, telcos and regional platform providers, as well as technology providers, coming up with their own versions of what a sovereign cloud needs to do. When we talk about hyperscalers, they are approaching this market from a pure tech front. They are building sovereign cloud controls on top of their existing public cloud platforms. For example, an example of the same would be the Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability, right? Similarly, when we talk about service providers, we talk about Accenture, which is providing its enterprise customers the ability to see live examples and build blueprints based on their own specific demands, right? Along with guidance from Accenture Cloud for specialists. When I talked about collaboration, and a very good example of that would be the collaboration between SAP, which is a tech vendor, and Arvato Systems, which is a service provider. They're collaborating together to build a sovereign cloud infrastructure for the German market. So net, what we're seeing in the market is a lot of hyperscalers, service providers, technology vendors are trying to address the demand in their own way. Now that we've seen what the enterprise, what the ecosystem landscape looks like, Nitish, why don't you let us in into what are some of their strategies to address the same?
Yep, I think it's a testament to the fact that this is a massive and a complex ecosystem, that we see a lot of partnerships and ecosystem orchestration that's coming into play. And that's happening through two lenses. One, we see new entities or joint ventures being established by the large hyperscalers, which are, they might have originated in North America, but are as global as they come. But they're also now partnering with the European telco or telecom providers. We also see, on the other hand, these hyperscalers or some technology providers partnering with regional service providers or system integrators, and you see a few examples on the bottom left. At the same time, we're seeing new offerings and new solutions being launched by these technology vendors, the regional providers, as well as hyperscalers. So which points to the earlier fact that I mentioned around orchestration of this ecosystem. And that's where a lot of system integrators are spearheading these initiatives, because they do, enterprises and the clients you work with do need some sort of an assurance of somebody who can program, manage this, keep that governance ongoing, and so on. So these two approaches will continue to coexist. I don't think it's a case of doing one or the other. It's definitely an and equation between the two. And I think we'll continue to monitor how we go from here. As we move on, what we will also see is, that was talking about sovereignty, but how do we see sustainability evolving as we think about enterprises? We believe there are going to be three phases, and we are already, I think, in some ways between phase 1 and phase 2, where people are moving from just looking at sustainability as a compliance checkbox to how do I think about sustainability for revenue and profitability, which is, sustainability as a legit means of attracting more customers, retaining customers, both externally as well as internal customers, which is attracting the right talent. But we really believe the holy grail for this in some ways will be where sustainability becomes synonymous with competitive differentiation. We are already seeing early signs of organizations who are more sustainable in the true sense, not just reporting for it, showcasing metrics which are really important in the long term, whether it's around revenue, whether it's around margins, or in terms of their goodwill and their ability to attract the right talent. So we believe this is an ongoing journey. At this point, most of the large clients we work with are somewhere between the first and the second bucket. Only a few have truly made it a source for competitive differentiation. On the next page, what you'll see is, a very dense slide, but the intent is not to go through all of this. This is something we came up with while working with a large bank in the UK. And what they were trying to do is really understand, where are we in the sustainability journey? So we believe there's a lot of FOMO, or fear of missing out, in the sustainability market, but people don't know where to start. So this was our attempt to help them address where they are in that journey as they think about, 4 levels of being socially responsible to the ultimate holy grail of being purpose-driven. And this almost acted like a checklist or a diagnostic for them. So we recommend that you do this with your clients if you're a provider, or help them, get more educated or aware of where they are. Because then once they know where they are in the journey, they know what to do next, right? A lot of that first step that we see clients struggling with, given how wide sustainability is just where to start. Now, this is, as I said, quite a lot of information to go through. let's try and talk a little bit about what are the specific levers you have as we move to the next slide around aspects of sustainability that enterprises can adopt. And we have categorized them in two buckets. You have services and solution levers, which can range from what's industry specific to more horizontal stuff, as well as technology levers, which can cut across a range of initiatives. So if we talk about green financing, how do you optimize your manufacturing from an energy perspective, sustainable lending, these are very industry or vertical specific solutions. At the same time, there is a whole raft of horizontal or industry agnostic solutions which can help. So risk management in ESG, how do you measure and analyze supply chain traceability? These can apply to a range of industries. And this will be underpinned by a robust building blocks of technology levers which help you do this. We're seeing a lot of focus on green software or sustainability software and engineering around that. We're seeing green data centers evolve for a number of years. We're starting to see even technology sourcing become more sustainable. In some recent RFPs, we've seen clients almost put in a weightage of 15 to 20% in round one for provider selection. And this is not just how sustainable my provider is, but what are the capabilities a provider has to help me in my sustainability journey. So I think this is where the rubber meets the road and clients are, being serious about this and not just paying lip service. And if you go to the next page, you'll see some of that testament from some of the clients we spoke to. It's always interesting to get clients to lend their names to these public testimonials. So you'll see a smattering of named clients and some anonymized ones, but all of them talk about what they're trying to do, but also point to some of the critical challenges for this ecosystem. And in our opinion, there are going to be two specific challenges. One is the lack of universal standards or consensus on standards for this ecosystem. And the second is this increasing focus on the quality of ESG data, which in some ways has been, accelerated given how much greenwashing that exists in the ecosystem. So we will see this focus on developing and evolving a consensus for these standards, as well as more regulatory push and scrutiny of green data to avoid greenwashing. And I think these are two challenges that we'll focus on. So across scope 1, 2, and 3. And, I think this is what we expect going forward. Anushka, I wonder that, there are all of these challenges we've seen despite the increased adoption. Do you think that's impacting the way people think about the providers and the partners that they work with?
Absolutely, 100%, Nitish. And I do see this particular landscape around the sustainability market being very complex. And in fact, there's this sense of competition more than there is of just pure competition, right? We do see them collaborating on some fronts while also competing on the others. So there's, again, the sense of competition that's there in the sustainability market, especially in the provider ecosystem. Now, talking from an enterprise lens, right, there are 3 to 4 key provider segments that are crucial for an enterprise to drive the sustainability journey. This includes system integrators and consulting firms, tech providers, and data vendors, right? Now, again, it's not just that we have all three, and based on, let's say, if somebody wants to do a data analysis, they should directly go to a data vendor. It becomes extremely important for an enterprise to very pointedly understand which one of these vendors would be the best choice for them for their particular sustainability requirements. Let's say, for an example, should an energy and utilities sector enterprise go with a data vendor if they want to do a data analysis across their sustainability journey, or should they go to a tech vendor or a system integrator which has very focused data around energy and utilities market specifically, right? So there is some overlap that takes place, and it becomes extremely imperative for enterprises to understand the nuances across the sustainability ecosystem. Now, again, as I mentioned, industry specificity. So all in all, 3 pointers that I would suggest. If you could just quickly go back to the previous slide, I'll just quickly finish that up, right? So again, industry specificity and the ability to understand your own priorities are something which will help enterprises drive their sustainability journey along with the ecosystem partners. All right, now Nitish, moving on. Now that we've talked about the ecosystem partners, what are some of the initiatives being taken by service providers specifically in this market?
Absolutely. And I think, Anushka, in some ways you addressed a few of them already, but, similar to the peak matrix assessment that we showcased earlier around cloud services in Europe, we did a very recent one in H1 this year around sustainability enablement services. So looking at service providers and their investments in this area and what clients are happy with or unhappy with, and 4 specific things emerged. One of the things which is on the top right, and Anushka has spoken about this already, domain expertise, industry specificity is really, really key. And sometimes it's not just down to the industry, but also the person or the stakeholder in the enterprise you're trying to serve. So a sourcing stakeholder has a very different way of embedding sustainability in their task versus the CIO, the CTO audience, versus people in business, versus people in corporate functions, and so on. The first thing also that we've highlighted here is consulting and advisory, which is not to say it's only a consulting or advisory market. The real market opportunities stitch it together across consulting and advisory and the tech and operations and data stack. But a lot of this, unfortunately or fortunately, starts with consulting or awareness. So how do you have the right people who can have that conversation with the client, not just keyboard, but also whiteboard? And how can they help them develop that roadmap as they're tackling something which is as wide and encompassing as sustainability? The third thing that's coming up and that clients are not seeing a lot of value in right now, but they really want to, is how do you think about ecosystem and end-to-end partnerships? So your ability to not just provide solutions on your own, but also with technology partners, cloud hyperscalers, data vendors, and packaging it. And the last is, how do you think about some of these emerging technology capabilities and how they can be used in the current world of sustainability and sovereignty in some ways? I've seen a few questions that have already come in. Some of them have been around, will Web3 solve for it, right, from a sovereignty perspective? And those are the questions that clients are starting to ask, because they also want to catalyze this process. They don't want to wait the same amount of time they have for previous technology programs. So those are some of the emerging things that we're seeing. And if we move to the next page, we'll see what some of the providers are doing in this landscape. Again, I've seen a bunch of questions come in, which are around what are the hyperscalers doing? What are some of the enterprise platform companies doing? This focuses more on their sustainability footprint. And it's a function of three things. There is a lot of your drinking your own Kool-Aid or drinking your own champagne, depending on what you prefer. So they are trying to make sure that their net zero commitments, the way they think about carbon offsetting, all of that is in line or ahead of most clients and organizations that they work with. The second big aspect is how they think about their own solutions. So launching new solutions, frameworks, reporting, as well as cloud solutions to help clients accelerate this. In cloud, one of the easy things people are using is the ability to switch data centers or availability zones based on where you are and how far you are to optimize your real estate and energy costs. And the last is the partnerships and the ecosystem investments that they're making with consulting firms, system integrators, as well as niche providers. And we'll continue to see some of this evolve. Moving on to the next one, you'll see the source for a lot of this, similar to the peak metrics we spoke about earlier. This is the one on sustainability I referenced. And again, you'll see a bunch of system integration companies and consulting players on this. Again, by no means an exhaustive list, but this tells you the direction of where people are and what their capabilities are. And there's a more detailed report on this for anybody that's interested. Now, moving on, let's do our second poll of the day. I know there's been a lot of conversation around these topics already. This talks about the challenges that you're facing as you think about sustainability and sovereignty, and this time you can only choose one. So what's the top challenge that you face right now? Is it lack of clarity on your objectives? Is it the availability or the lack of solutions and capability from existing partners? Is it internal technical expertise? Is it the part that we mentioned around common standards, measurements, and indicators? Or is it really the ambiguity or lack of clarity around the regulatory compliance mandate? So this one is an interesting one. I don't know if I'd have a, clear answer, but Anushka, while people vote for another 30 odd seconds, what do you think about this?
I mean, I talked about the first 2 points, so I need to do justice to my words. So I would say, of course, there's some sort of incoherence internally within organizations where they don't have a lot of clarity around what exactly they're trying to meet when they're talking about cloud sovereignty and sustainability. And again, there's also supply-demand gap, wherein we do see players like Azure coming up with very strict compliance rules, right? Like I talked about the German directory that these folks need to log into. So according to me, either the first one or the second one, these should be the top two challenges in this market.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what people vote. And I take my words back initially, Anushka. I don't think you can read minds, because the first one that people voted for, about a little more than a third, was around the ambiguity around the regulatory mandate. And I kind of see why people said that, even though it does seem surprising. It's followed closely by the popular opinion around lack of common standards, indicators, measurements, or consensus around data standards. and then, availability of solutions and capabilities from existing partners, which is interesting because then it shows you how much innovation this market will need and can need to be able to get to where clients want to go. So this was really interesting. Now, if we go to the home stretch of how we're thinking about the story, we spoke a little bit about why this is important. We reflected on what end users as well as providers are doing. Where is this market going, right? And Anushka and I before this did some crystal ball gazing, looking at what are the trends in the market, and we came up with 2 or 3 specific things we'd like to talk about. First, we'll start with how we think about sourcing considerations of sustainability in the next 12 to 18 months if you're a large enterprise. So if you move on, we'll talk a little bit about what those 5 things are. So first is we believe, and we're seeing this already, that these 2 topics will almost become a default criteria for cloud purchasing decisions, especially in Europe. Sustainability, I already reflected how critical it is in the RFP of the sourcing process now. We are starting to see sovereignty also climb up the ranks depending on how mission critical, the nature of data workloads, and so on. We also believe that next generation technologies, and you can include a whole list of those across IoT, AI, ML, blockchain, etc., will become a key enabler. But it's not just about the technology. The technology is a means to an end, and clients and enterprises and organizations need to think about what's purpose built, what's the right fit versus, just playing digital buzzword bingo. The third thing is we expect clients and enterprises will want their providers to have both horizontal as well as industry focused solutions, which is what we saw earlier. And this is even more relevant in sustainability, which has a lot of industry specific processes and functions that need to be thought about. The fourth one, and we're seeing a lot of questions around this in the Q&A tab, where we believe hyperscalers will embed and are embedding sovereignty almost by default. And they will look for providers, system integrators, service providers to bring in more accountability and compliance, but own that program while providing baked-in solutions. And then we believe that on cloud sovereignty, this will really become enabled by the ecosystem. So how do service providers step up to the plate and lead this, but then work with a cohort of partners to make sure clients have the right assurance on their ecosystem? If we move to the next one, we'll try and focus on what are the things you should be doing to manage this. And we believe there are 3 or 4 aspects. One is really think about embedding sustainability and sovereignty principles in all your decision-making processes. It's easier said than done. We see, for instance, in sustainability, a lot of this coming top down, where unless there are board level mandates, exec compensation linked to sustainability, it doesn't flow down the organization. So making sure you have leadership buy-in, executive sponsorship is really important, and then making sure it percolates down the organization. The second we've spoken about a little bit already, technology will be a key enabler, but how do you think about deploying the right ones across these initiatives will be an important determinant. The third is just being aware that there will be challenges on the way. I don't think anybody has cracked the code on how to do this well yet. People are still discovering this. This market is full of a lot of education opportunities right now, as I said earlier. So how do you have a collaborative network of providers that you can bank on, work with, brainstorm and blueprint with will be important. This is not something you can easily package in an RFP and source right now. And then we believe that as we think about the holy grail of being purpose-led, clients will now start to think about not just social responsibility and messaging and reporting, but they will think of sustainability as a means of competitive differentiation. And that just improves or increases the level of seriousness with which they approach this topic. So, this is our hope for the ecosystem. We do hope that this is how things will move. We are starting to see early signs of this, but we're more than hopeful that this will land in the right place. Now, as we go to the last part of our discussion, we wanted to focus on a few quick things. One is, an offer for a lot of our enterprise customers, which talks about how you can get more specific market intelligence around specific providers that you work with on their sovereignty and sustainability credentials. You'll now see a link in the chat window, which you can just go to and sign up, and our teams will be in touch. You can choose one of these regions that you see on the left, and then you can get specific insights and questions that you see on the right around what are they doing in sovereignty, what are their solutions on sovereignty and sustainability, what kind of industry specific government policies and initiatives will impact this. So just make more informed sourcing choices on how you can leverage the provider ecosystem to do this better. And the team and I will be more than happy to chat and share our perspectives. So the link will remain in the chat. Please feel free to sign up. and then our teams will be in touch. And that's really what we wanted to talk about. Now, I think we have about 10 odd minutes for Q&A, so we'll take a few questions. But if you have questions even after this, you can reach out to a few of any of our team members. We're supposed to have a few more team members join us today, but reminder that the virus is still amongst us. We had to be creative. But you can reach out to Anushka, I, or anybody listed on this page for more insights. And the next few pages, and you'll get this deck, as you mentioned in the beginning. You can see a lot of our research around these topics in the next few pages, from blogs, white papers, reports, viewpoints. We've been covering this market in a lot of depth. So you can see a lot of our ready-to-use research on this topic as well. So with that, I want to come to my favorite part personally of webinars like these, which is Q&A. I think there's been a whole host of questions around emerging technologies for sustainability, but more importantly, I think sovereignty as well, like Web3. Will Web3 help with this? And my answer to that is, yes and no. And it's a very consultant or an analyst type answer, but I'll tell you why I'd say that. The problem with a lot of technologies is some of the emerging exponential technologies. There's a lot of interesting use cases that's coming up, but they have not been truly tried and tested. And I'll take Web3 as an example. So one of the things we've been hearing from clients, and as they're trying to adopt this, is I think Web3 has a lot of potential, from next generation digital commerce to how do you think about microtransactions, how do you think about programmable money, and so on. But the decentralization of data and internet, and as well as the user controlled and governed mechanism, sometimes is not the easiest one for regulators to digest. So we do believe Web3 will be an important aspect of decentralization of the internet, but it's not going to be the only thing that helps it, and it's definitely not going to be a silver bullet. So we believe it will require some more regulatory action, but also consensus on how we think about true decentralization, as well as governing all the user-generated content and governance mechanisms. We've also heard about, some people are asking about which countries do we see more concern about sovereignty than others in Europe. I think Europe, being given how fragmented it is, there's definitely a difference in some countries. And Anushka, I don't know if you have a view around this, but I'm personally seeing, the dark region or the German-speaking market, France with its new Cloud Act last year, and then UKI lead some of the charge from a sovereignty and concerns perspective. But Anushka, I don't know if you're picking up other aspects of this as well.
Absolutely no, Nitish. I think you hit the bullseye. We do see, like I mentioned, GAIA-X as well, right? So we do see Germany and France especially picking up the pace when we talk about the cloud sovereignty market.
Perfect. So, and I think we have a few more questions around, and this is an interesting one. We spoke about all the joint ventures, the new solutions and companies that people are launching around this. Like the Orange Business Services, Capgemini Initiative Below in France, and then others, right? How do we see these similar approaches in European countries? We believe, so I think there's going to be two things. One, we'll see an evolution of this or a continuation of this trend, because as Anushka said, cooperation is going to be important. It's not just going to be competition. So we will continue to see them do this. I do believe the markets where this is launched are going to be slightly different. So I don't think every European country or large European economy will see these joint ventures or new companies. It has taken up in France just because of the new Cloud Act last year. So we'll see some more country-specific or topical investments. But we do definitely see at an overall level more collaboration, even if they don't mean just new companies between some competitors and also technology partners that will come in. I also want to pick up a few. I want to do justice to the number of questions that came in before the webinar as well. And one of the things was really around, how do we think about sovereignty regulations across different countries? And we've spoken a little bit about this, but also how has the hybrid work model influenced supplier management or approaches around sovereignty? And I think this is an important question. We've seen two things happen because of this. So one, there was a push in hybrid or decentralized or remote work from COVID, as we all know, so that anyways pushed enterprise thinking around how they do this, but they still want more security, more privacy, more data security guardrails around where work gets done, especially when they're outsourcing. So one thing is sovereignty has become even more important after this, because enterprises sometimes perceive that they've lost control of how this information is being used. They want just some more additional assurances, whether it's in terms of using technologies that help in remote work and securing that data, but also their approach to things like the gig economy or crowdsourcing, because they don't want the same, sometimes they don't want the same provider resource working on different projects or different clients through the day. So that is one. I think at the same time, it has also changed their attitudes and focus on which locations they go for. So we've been hearing and we've been using these terms like offshoring, nearshoring, onshoring for a while. We even had right shoring in here for a while. What we are now seeing is friend shoring or ally shoring. To my point earlier around the war in Ukraine and how that's created an implication around cyber warfare, people are now thinking about, hey, if I'm going to outsource to somebody or set up my own captive or in-house center, should I do it in a country which is a NATO member? Should I do it in a country which is a part of the European Union or a non-EU country? Should I do it in a country which based on the geopolitical stance? So I think enterprise approaches have been influenced by COVID, where hybrid work became the new norm, but they want some more assurances around how the data is used. And I think now they're considering more proximate destinations for outsourcing, even though they know that the talent sometimes can be limited versus places like India or the Philippines, which have a lot of depth in terms of talent for technology and business process. I think I'm just taking a look at the clock. I think we have a few more minutes. So we will do 2 or 3 more questions. And again, for folks who when we are not able to answer questions today, our teams will follow up. I think there's an interesting and long question on SAP and RISE and how SAP is going all out on RISE, and they're thinking of some of the sovereign cloud industries like public sector, healthcare and life sciences are onboarding a lot of RISE solutions. So the question really is there any direction from a European context on how SAP partners need to tailor their offerings, given that the hyperscaler or the infrastructure layer is purely in the hands of SAP versus the partner? So very interesting question. My only reaction to that will be, I think this is not just an SAP problem, right? Any of the big hyperscalers or enterprise platform companies, if they have a cloud offering, will want to control the infrastructure layer from a security perspective, from a bundling perspective, and so on. So in some ways, this problem coexists, but I think what you're pointing to is the fact that players like SAP and even hyperscalers are going full stack. They're not just satisfied with the infrastructure layer or the platform layer. They want to think of SaaS. They want to think of industry-specific solutions. So my advice for SAP partners or any of the partners of these technology vendors is to really focus on orchestrating and governing that ecosystem for clients. Because an SAP or a large hyperscaler is not incentivized to run that whole program on their own. They don't have as many people in professional services to do it. So clients still need somebody to run, orchestrate, underwrite the risk of sovereignty. So that is, I think, a bigger role for a provider or a service provider to play, along with the fact that you can have industry-specific offerings that you innovate with SAP on. So that would be my short answer, but very interesting question. So and thanks for asking this. We'll talk a little bit about the last question because I know we don't have a lot of time. And Anushka, I'm going to lobby it over to you. This has been asked live, and this is around what has been the take up or the uptake of sovereign cloud services in UKI and DACH. I think we spoke a little bit about this, but is security understanding or the lack of that, for instance, holding organizations back? So security and sovereignty, how critical this is, and are we seeing some interesting trends there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we also talked about the fact that currently the sovereign clouds are restrictive in nature, which is why enterprises are also looking for hyperscaler clouds to actually be able to address their sovereignty needs also in some sense, and also be able to reap the true benefits of a public cloud, right? So for sure, security is something that is acting as an inhibitor in terms of allowing enterprises to sort of address or access their workloads and data on cloud. What about you, Nitish? Anything you'd like to add? I'm sure you have more words.
Yeah, no, but this is, I think you did, that's a great answer. And I think it's, in some ways, security has to be, should not be an afterthought. It has to be baked in. And that's what we're trying to see. And we're seeing from a lot of providers. I'll take one last one, which I think is an interesting one around technology solutions or technology partners that are being consumed around sustainability, the top sustainability solutions. In my opinion, there are 3. One is just green cloud or making cloud more efficient that we spoke about. That's a long, it's a big area of investment, and then there's a long tail given how prominent that is. So right from which real estate do you look at, the utilities footprint, improving temperatures, improving utilization. I think green cloud or efficient cloud generally is a big area. And hyperscalers have a big role to play because they can help you switch availability zones or which data center you're using and so on. I think the second one is really around trust and ethics of data reporting. So there's a lot of question around reporting, which is the starting point for sustainability, but clients want a lot more trust in the ability to enforce as well as report that data. So I think that's a big area of focus. And I think the third one, which we're starting to see, is how do you do reporting, not just externally, but internally from a governance perspective? Clients are trying to monitor this as they go along. So how can they monitor this in real time almost? How can they work across the data providers that they're getting this data on, and then inform next best actions within the enterprise? So I'd say those are the top sustainability solutions that we're seeing. And for more details, the team is more than happy to chat. So that was a quick fire round. Hopefully we did justice to a lot of these questions. I know we did answer all of this, but unfortunately we are running out of time. So I hope everyone enjoyed and liked this conversation. The teams are available to have a chat with you separately. And for those of you who signed up for the CTA, our teams will be in touch. You'll see the CTA and the complimentary access link for enterprise customers on in the chat window already. So with this, I'd like to thank you for your time today. Anushka, thanks for being with me on this journey. And I look forward to these conversations even after the webinar.
And to be here, hope this was helpful for all. Thanks, Nitish.